republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. It has been distributed and is available to the public. The consent agenda has items A through M, and the regular agenda has items 1 through 16.
Make a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D is the approval of the minutes of August 2nd. They have been distributed and available to the public.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner. Olson moves, Commissioner Jurdevig seconds to approve the minutes of August 2nd as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Consent agenda items A through M. Again, Commissioners, any questions, any thoughts?
I'll make a
Motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig moves, Commissioner Simmons seconds to approve the consent agenda as items A through M as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Regular agenda, item number 1 is a public hearing for Oliver Outlook Senior Affordable Housing Pilot Request. Lauren Orchard, Economic Development Director for the City of West Fargo, and Megan Elshog, Planning and Zoning Director at City of West Fargo, will be presenting. Good evening, Ms. Orchard.
Good evening. Thank you, Commission President Dardis, and good evening, Commissioners. This evening, myself and our Planning Director, Megan Elshog, are here to offer a brief overview of a pilot application from Mr. Jim Toomey for a 30-unit senior affordable housing project that has been proposed as part of a mixed-use development at 33rd Avenue West and 6th Street West, just southwest of the lights. Mr. Toomey has constructed 7 similar developments in West Fargo, receiving a 15-year pilot from the city in each case. However, Mr. Toomey has not yet received a pilot from this commission, and the City of West Fargo does not have a current policy to process affordable housing incentive requests. Because there's no current precedent or policy, the Economic Development Department has provided an incentive analysis, and the Planning Department has provided a staff report in the agenda packet, along with a co-authored memo summarizing the request and how the pilot interacts with state-awarded low-income housing tax credits, also called LIHTC. While staff have provided these analysis documents, neither department has provided a formal recommendation because the city has not adopted a plan or study regarding affordable housing in West Fargo, and staff has been reliant solely upon the applicant's market study to determine need. Although staff do not have a formal recommendation, the project was brought to the city's Economic Development Advisory Committee, which voted to recommend approval of the incentive based on community benefit rather than economic benefit. The committee also asked the Commission to clarify their role in processing affordable housing incentive requests going forward. At tonight's meeting, we are asking for the Commission to both hold a public hearing to comply with State Century Code and also to provide guidance to staff through formal action, directing them to continue or not continue facilitation of the project with the county and the school district as the pilot asks for 15 years. As a point of clarification, a final vote approving a 15-year pilot cannot be made by the City Commission tonight until both the county and school district consider the incentive. And before we take any questions or hold a public hearing, I would like to open the floor to the developer, Mr. Toomey, if he is in the audience, to provide further explanation of the project and how the pilot would facilitate the senior affordable housing development.
Good evening, James Toomey, developer of the
housing side of this project. The commercial side will be developed and owned by Terry Welly, who is also the contractor on the project. He's been the contractor on every one of the previous projects we've built. This is the 8th time in 16 years that we've been before the commission with an affordable housing project for seniors in West Fargo. The result of that is 205 units of rental housing for seniors here in the city, and we're recommending and asking that you assist us in providing an additional 30 units. The 30, all of the units are in the community for 30 years. They are affordable and subject to restricted rents and incomes by the tenants for that period of time. I might mention that I thought this might be a kind of a lengthy presentation, but I have to say, Lauren's report is not only really well written, it is thorough and complete. And in the same way, I'd like to comment on Megan and her staff. The report before planning and zoning was the same thing, thorough, complete, and really explained what was before that commission, as Lauren's does. And both of them are extremely impressive, I think. Lauren's report shows the history of what we've done, dating back to the very early 2000s. It talks about this project. It also explains to you and provides information on the tax credit housing program that the federal government has that's administered by the state housing agency. That is the program that affordable housing is developed under and has been for about 30 years in our country, the federal housing program. This type of housing will not be done without that program. And that program allows us to make an application to the state housing agency, and we will compete with other developers who are going to be before the agency requesting credits for their project in other communities throughout the state. I think Fargo last year got 2 of the 3 or 4 that were allocated to different developers in the state. The one thing that is not in the report, and I think an explanation is important, is we have never done a mixed-use project before. And the reason that we're coming with a mixed use is that we're on a commercially zoned site. And it was 7 years ago, almost exactly this time of year, that the city commission indicated at a meeting that it would no longer change commercially zoned property to residential for multifamily development. And it specifically indicated they would not do that even for a senior housing project. And if we were going to use commercial land for a senior project, we had to have a commercial component to it. And I know that there's at least one commissioner that will remember that meeting very, very specifically, I think, because it was a rather dramatic meeting. So since then, we've done 2 projects. They've been on residential land, residentially zoned land. This is on a commercial site. There is nothing else that we can find that we can afford for this project. So we're on a commercial site. The site is actually, I think, and Terry Welly, who found the site, we believe it's a good site for this because directly to the south across the street is multifamily housing. So it kind of provides a nice transition between commercial and between the residential. The pilot and the tax credits, everything associated with that is applicable only to the housing side of the project. The commercial side has to stand on its own. There will be 2 different ownership groups, and there will be, and the commercial side is fully taxed. We think this is what the commission was directing us to do 7 years ago, and this is why we proposed it in this way. Now, the last project we did was completed and placed in service in 2019, and that's called Harper Heights. That means that we haven't been before the commission since about 2017. And as Lauren pointed out, the commission has changed for the most part. And it seems to me the question is the commission now, does the commission now want to continue the progress that's been made in providing affordable housing to seniors in the community? And if you do, this is the program that it's going to occur under, and it won't be done without that. So I would ask that you approve this, even though it's not for economic benefit, it's for community benefit, and it is substantial community benefit in providing affordable housing to seniors. And I would ask you to approve it then. And that's all I have, unless there's some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Toomey. Commissioners, questions for the gentleman?
Can't think of any.
So what happens in your funding model if the pilot program is at 10 years rather than 15 years?
Each project is in existence for 30 years, and it's in effect divided into two parts, the first 15 and the second 15. The credits that we if we're selected by the state, the credits then that were awarded are sold to an investor. The investor has to hold their investment for 15 years. The mortgage that we'll get, the first mortgage on the property that we'll get, will be a 15-year mortgage. The pilot allows the property to cash flow with the use of the credits. And if a pilot is for a shorter period of time, it simply will not cash flow. In the second 15 years, the project will stand on its own. There is no idea or thought of coming back and asking for any additional support from the city. And but we'll have reserve accounts that will build up in the first 15 years, and the equity that we gain in the reduction of the mortgage on the property will allow us to use that equity to help support the project in the second 30 years. But in the first 15, a pilot has to be for the entire 15 years.
So when you say that it doesn't cash flow, that's taking into account that because there's a separate ownership group, that the commercial property with the rents or whatever there is not applied whatsoever to the housing project?
That's correct. The two will be completely separate, and there'll be no benefit in the pilot to the commercial side whatsoever. There is a pro forma that Lauren has included in the report, and it's our best estimate right now. It may be tweaked a little bit before for the application to the state, but it's pretty, very, very close to what we think it will be. And it shows about an $8,000 or $9,000 cash flow on 30 units with a pilot included. It would show a deficit of $25,000 or $30,000 or $35,000 if the pilot is not there. In other words, the project isn't feasible without it.
Commissioner Jurdovig.
More of a comment. You know, your previous project that you referenced, I think, was a great use of the 15-year pilot. Because it's, to be honest, a property that probably wouldn't have developed very easily otherwise.
D's Trailer Court.
What was that?
D's Trailer Court.
You know, when I look at this property, it's the other end of the spectrum, and a 15-year incentive is a big ask. So
Well, I might
vote
point
will
out.
reflect that.
I might point out that four of the original 4 projects are right on 13th Avenue.
And I would have likely voted against those two if I would have been on the commission at that time. So.
Commissioner Olson.
I'm curious about the garages. You have 16 detached garages and 14 that are considered tuck-under garages, part of the main structure. Are they part of the pilot too, that you're asking for?
The garages would be, yes.
The garages would be too.
The tuck-under garages would be. They are associated with the project and they would receive tax credits.
And the detached garages.
and the detached garages as well. So what we'd like to do is have a garage for every one of the tenants. The tenant population here is generally going to be older than 55, and they're widows for the most part. Most will have a garage or have a car to use the garage for, but only maybe about 75%. However, the unit sizes are not that large. If you, I think it was mentioned, it's 886 feet for a two-bedroom and about 717 for a one-bedroom. And those are driven by the state. The state tells us how large the units can be. So the tenants will use garage space for storage as well, and they appreciate that.
You made a comment earlier about previous commissions and their commitment to affordable housing in our community. And that was an accurate statement. That's a good statement. And this commission would, and I can't speak for all of the commissioners up here, but we still have that philosophy that affordable housing for seniors is a priority within our community. It's outlined in our comprehensive plan and the like. But Commissioner Jurdevig does make a very valid point that on our commercial properties, that we want to be very protective of that. So it'll be interesting to see how this vote goes this evening. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. More of a comment than anything, Jim, and you looked at me and you're right. I was here those how many years ago. And back then, the old commission, we were very concerned with senior housing. We had none. And we heard the stories of how people would have to go out to Arthur, older people that wanted to stay, retired seniors had to live in Arthur because we had nowhere here. They could not come back home. And so your group and you, Jim, thankfully, thank you, stepped forward and started building new senior housing. And when you mentioned the 13th Avenue one, Commissioner Jurgovec, I'm not disagreeing with you, but it makes me think, and Mayor, ironically, you're very involved with this because one of our most dearly beloved ex-mayors, Florence, ended up living in one of your senior housing as she grew older and more beautiful, I might add. And so to me, that's a perfect example of why we are doing what we're doing and why we should be doing this. It's not all about making that last God almighty dollar. It's about providing services for our community and our older seniors as well. And so I commend you, and I'll continue to support you.
Thank you, appreciate that very much. One way to look at senior housing also is if seniors who have lived in the community and are in their residence for many years, raised their families in neighborhoods, if they have places to go, they can sell their home and move into a senior affordable housing that is well-planned, well-constructed, and well-operated. And that, as far as I'm concerned, encourages seniors to stay to leave their homes and to stay in the community, which is where they want to stay.
And it's interesting because when Commissioner Jurdevig and Olson and I were running for election, I spent a lot of time in the senior citizens' neighborhoods, and they would invite me in for coffees. And it was amazing to me how many of these people were from rural North Dakota, though. The first several that I went to, there was one West Fargoan that lived that was in this group, and I probably met with 50 or 60 people over 3 different coffee groups. And the one, he was a former employee of mine, was the only one. Charlie was the only one. Everybody else had come from small town North Dakota. So it is a great service. There's no question about that. And the community, and our commission continues to support these types of projects. The 15 years is a strong ask, and I know that recently in conversations with Cass County Commission and with the school district administration, there's a lot of dialogue going on about the term of some of these projects. And can't speak again for those groups, but I do know that is a point of conversation. And you're well aware of that. I mean, you're a professional. You've been doing this. You've made a career out of this, doing it very well. So.
Well, since the last time we were here was in 17, that predated the county and the school board having a say.
Having to participate in it.
Just barely, literally just barely. So it's an interesting process to go through. Having said that, affordable housing will not be built without using a program like the tax credit program. It will pay for up to 90% of the construction costs and other development costs. Our mortgage will be maximized as high as we can get it based on the rents that we can charge and the expenses that we have in the project. But it will not occur unless we do it under this program and unless the city participates. I would argue that this is a very inexpensive way for the city to provide for affordable housing for seniors. The alternative to not using this program and not supporting it with a pilot is, if you want it, you're gonna have to the city would have to set up some other kind of funding source. And the expense involved with that would be enormous. And it has not been done very often through our entire state, that type of thing. But the tax credit program allows that to be done.
It's part of your application. It's noted on there with regard to the commercial side of things, possible offices or, commercial retail, whatever the case might be. Do you have any more information, anything you could share with us on that? And I realize Mr. Welly owns that part of it. It's a separate ownership group. You could share it with us, or?
Why don't, Terry
gentleman.
is here. And
I see
he's
that
here
Mr. Welly's in the room. Mr. Welly, would you please step to the microphone too? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening.
Could you share with us a little bit what your thoughts are in this partnership, or what you're probably going to do there?
Yes, so I am proposing, or what we have planned right now is to be about 5,500 square feet of commercial space on the main floor on the north half of the building, facing the commercial to the north. And the parking on the north side would be for the commercial space, so segregating or keeping the commercial all to the north side where the commercial is, and the ends are gonna be the entrances into the apartment side of it. The garages are on the south side, so trying to keep the apartment side of it to the apartments to the south side. And the anticipation is that the tenants will be mostly likely be professionals. I'll just say insurance, accountants, stuff like that. Smaller spaces. The demand for, these are 900 square foot office spaces. The demand for smaller spaces is increased quite a bit through what we've all gone through in the last year, and it's not as many people, I'll just say, larger offices are not that much in demand. Smaller ones are, and there's very few of them, and so, like anything, there's an opportunity and there's a demand. And so when we started talking about the mixed use, it seemed like a natural way of achieving mixed use and also supplying office space in West Fargo.
All right. But the likeliness of a retail establishment generating sales tax dollars is
What?
probably not at 900 square.
I don't know. I mean, would I rent to a retail? Absolutely. You know what? Whoever would like to rent to it, it's business. Yes.
All right, sir.
The realtor is saying he really anticipates it's going to be commercial people.
I understand. Commissioner Olson, please.
Have you considered having all of your parking for the residents underground? That would free up where those 16 detached garages are for more commercial space over there, since we are in a commercial district, rather than having parking like that?
Well, yes, I've looked at lots of scenarios. Obviously, the one would be, okay, so the half built, the south half achieving 14 stalls. If we were to go to underground parking, the numbers just get,
Sure. Expensive.
again, the numbers don't work for Jim. I mean, it gets to be too expensive, and in the tax credit program, I mean, I'll say, it's very tight and competitive, and so you can't, You can afford to design a $200,000 unit, but you're not gonna get an allocation, it's very competitive, so there's this balancing act of giving the right amenities or amenities that the residents will want and enjoy and also want to move into your project, but also you have to be fiscally responsible in the sense that you can't just go hog wild.
Thank you.
And I hope that kind of describes what,
I might point out, Terry's estimate of construction costs are up $1,200,000 over the previous project. And this project isn't that much different than the previous project. And it's just the natural inflationary costs that go up every year, but then in the last year and a half, the numbers have gotten just phenomenal. And the last project was about 5.5 million, and this is estimated right now at 7.1. And we're not going to have any larger mortgage. We'll have a little larger mortgage, but we're not going to be able to have a great deal higher mortgage. So that means that the vast majority of the money for the project comes from the tax credits. And frankly, I don't know what the state's going to do, because every developer in the state and every builder are confronted with that. And it means that there has to be less projects awarded this year than they would normally do. And they only do 3 or 4 out of 10 a year. And I'm wondering how many they can actually do. But to talk about doing something more elaborate than this would just throw the numbers, the construction numbers, just unbelievably high.
and obviously the land and specials are much higher than the last project also.
Particularly the specials. A nice aspect about the tax credit program is that the specials can be paid for by the tax credits. In other words, the state will allocate tax credits to pay for the specials. So we will pay, at the beginning, all of the tax credits associated with the housing side will be paid up front as part of the development. And then we're subject to specials taxes, just like everybody else. And increases in specials taxes, we have to live with that. This will not. The pilot obviously does not affect those.
Commissioners, additional questions for Mr. Welly or Mr. Toohey? All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
At this time, we will go into a public hearing for discussion. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on the project for the Oliver Outlook Senior Affordable Housing Pilot Request? Anyone from the public? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on the Oliver Overlook Senior Affordable Housing Pilot Request? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on the Oliver Overlook Senior Affordable Housing Pilot Request? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. Commissioners, your thoughts?
Are there any more comments from our staff on this?
Staff, is there anything that you'd like to address? Ms. Orchard or Alshot?
I suppose I would just like to add one other item to this property specifically, because I've received a lot of questions about the geography of this specific property. And I did provide a brief analysis to the schools that I do want to provide to the commission as well. We've looked at the property values surrounding that area, and once the pilot is completed, the property values that would be produced are very comparable to the properties just to the south of there. Those are mostly residential. And the way we've done that analysis is looking at the value per square foot, which is just over 1.25. So I just want to share that with you, that at the end of the day, after the 15 years, it would be comparable to other properties in the area. But other than that, I'd be here for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Orchard. Additional questions?
Just a comment, Mayor, if I could.
Please, Commissioner.
Again, you all know I've been around for all of these for them, and every one of these that I see that Jim and his group does are outstanding. And I know we all agree in senior housing is the question of whether or not we should do this one. I must admit, the difference with this one is the commercial below, and I really do like that. I wish we could get more, maybe retail in there, and hope maybe that will come. We don't know at this point, who will rent them out. It may be retail. It also may be some business down there that'll actually help the senior citizen community that lives above them. Maybe there'll be a coffee shop. Something like that would be great. So, again, I support this project. I think when I look back over the years and see that we had nothing, I think we're doing well in West Fargo, but I think we can do much better. And I think that all the senior home and housing we can get, especially moving in with all the baby boomers that we have coming up, all of us sitting up here actually, I think that it would be a mistake for us not to have more, to push hard for senior housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I guess if there are no questions, I would make a motion that we support this.
I have a motion to support the Oliver Overlook Senior Affordable Housing Pilot request. Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion fails due to a second. Item number 2 is a conditional use permit for multiple dwellings as part of a mixed-use development in a light commercial zoning district at 661 32nd Avenue West and 3255 6th Street Northwest. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. So this item is a conditional use permit that would allow for the previous project to take place. However, one of the staff recommendations was that this would only be recommended to be approved if the previous pilot application was approved, and therefore my recommendation would then be changed for the commission to deny the conditional use permit.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Questions for Mr. Peterson? Commissioners?
We need a motion to deny the permit.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to deny the permit for the multiple dwellings as part of the mixed-use development in the light commercial zoning district at 661 32nd Avenue West and 3255 6th Street West. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3 on the agenda is a proposed Willow Creek Second Subdivision plat and rezone. This was tabled on August 2nd, 2021, and it is a request to continue a public hearing. Mr. Malachi.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. Once again, we just received more information just this past week. However, it was after our deadline for this commission meeting had already taken place. And so us as staff are working to make sure that that application is good to go for the next city commission meeting. And so it would be staff's recommendation to table one more time. We're fairly confident that the application will be ready for you to be seen the next city commission meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Questions for Mr. Peterson?
Do we need a motion to, I'll make a motion to table it,
To extend.
to extend it.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig. It's been moved and seconded to extend the tabled actions on the Willow Creek Second Subdivision plat and rezone. Is there any discussion? I might add that at the recommendation of staff. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 4 is the second reading and final plat approval of the proposed Sunrise Acres Third Subdivision, replat and rezone. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is a replat and rezone of a previously subdivided lot into 2 for sale and development. The City Commission previously had a hearing on this at the August 2nd, 2021 meeting. The applicant has submitted an application for a replat and a preliminary plat for property located in the city's extraterritorial area, which is about 1.5 miles to the north of West Fargo city limits. The applicant owns a lot on the east side of Ann Street, which was previously used as a horse pasture, and proposes dividing the lot into 2 lots for sale and development. Another applicant to the north owns a vacant lot on the west side of Ann Street, which was previously used for horses as well. The applicants propose rezoning to R-1E Rural Estate District to construct single-family dwellings. The area is within a special flood hazard area. According to city regulations, any development will be required to meet all applicable federal, state, and local regulations, which may have changed since the existing homes were constructed in the area. Attached to your packet is the firm map for the location, along with the preliminary flood map for the residents. There have been concerns noted previously by Fargo Cass Public Health with regard to on-site septic systems being built on smaller lots in the floodplain. The addition of fill required to build homes sometimes does not leave adequate undisturbed soil for placement of proper drain field. The county sanitarian has been contacted by both the applicant and the city and has indicated that a minimum of 1 acre will be required for on-site septic systems. Property owners within 150 feet and applicable agencies and departments were all notified. So far, we have not received any comments post the first meeting that we had a few weeks back. The first comment that we received prior to the August 2nd meeting was from a neighbor to the west, or excuse me, to the east, who was worried about accessing her horse pasture. After some more research, staff found that there is actually a public easement on the north side of the property, which can be used for access. It is recommended that the city approve a proposed application on the basis that is consistent with city plans and ordinances with recommended conditions of approval as follows. 1, that any building permits should follow the preliminary flood map, which will require % allowable fill on any development. 2, any concerns from Fargo Cass Public Health with regard to on-site septic systems on the newly proposed lot is addressed in or reviewed by the applicant prior to consideration of the final plat. 3, the applicant is to meet all federal, state, and local requirements for improvements to the site and structures. 4, an attorney title opinion is received. 5, a drainage plan is approved by the city engineer. 6, a final plat is received with any necessary easements. And 7, a certificate is received showing taxes are current. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Questions for Mr. Peterson?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. It's been moved to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Willow Creek Second Subdivision Plat and Rezone. Any discussion?
Sunrise Acres.
Did I do that again?
You're one off.
Second reading and final plat approval. Proposed Sunrise Acres Third Subdivision. Replat and rezone. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 5 is to approve the purchase of garage doors for the South Side Fire Station. Mr. Chief Fuller.
Good afternoon, Commission President Dardis, members of the commission. This is for a request for purchase of garage doors for the South Fire Station. That station is 10 years old. We've had some issues with those garage doors here in the past, and it's recommended that they all be replaced. These new garage doors are of a different design than the standard overhead garage door. They're a bifold mechanism. They fold, open and fold, open and shut like your standard closet door. Very becoming common in fire stations across the country. However, we only have 2 suppliers that we get them from here locally. So there's 2 proposals, one from Midland Garage Doors and then one from PS Garage Doors. The benefits here are, number 1, safety. Having those large 16-foot garage doors off of the ceiling and onto the mounting on the sides of the garage door opening is a safety issue for the fire apparatus. Right now, our fire apparatus operators have to stop and actually reach forward and look up to see whether or not the door has cleared the top of the apparatus. They're slow. It's taking anywhere from 30 seconds for opening and 30 seconds for closing. We're adding a minute onto our response time when we're supposed to be out the door and en route to the call within a minute. I believe last week when I was here, we talked a little bit briefly about the importance of turnout times, getting out the door, then 60 seconds for medicals and 90 seconds for emergency medical calls. These doors will open and shut anywhere from 7 to 10 seconds. And then the operators and anyone near the actual door can visualize the entire door. So there's no question of whether or not it's open and shut. The maintenance on these are supposed to be lower than the overhead doors from what I'm told, but I don't have any documentation to show you that right now. So that's something that we've heard from other fire departments. Williston, Fargo Fire is starting to use these doors. So the action here is to approve the purchase of these garage doors for the South Fire Station, and it would be the Midland proposal at $209,000 for 5 garage doors. That's all 5 doors at that station. This is an out-of-budget item. The funds for this was an item that we had in the budget for next year, and we pulled all of our single-year capital improvement costs to try to get them taken care of this year. This would be a mill on next year's budget if we were to had kept it in. It probably would have been cut by now anyway, so that's why we're coming forward with this today. Speaking with Mr. Larson from Finance, we have relief funds that were distributed and created some reserves in our budget from, so this isn't necessarily a relief fund, a COVID relief fund item, but the opportunity is being created by that. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioners, any questions?
I just had, Chief, I want a couple of together here, but how long is it, what's our average time again to get to a fire, say within, a mile? What's our
Within a
average
mile from the
response time?
station?
Yep.
Let's see, a mile would be down Fifth Street, so 3 minutes.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going with this is when you're talking a difference of, 30 seconds or what have you, that's a half a minute. That's a lot of time in a 3-minute run. That's a huge advantage to get to that fire, I would think. I mean, it would help.
Yes.
You see where I'm going? I'm asking that question, I guess. I mean, that's.
Yep, absolutely. This would help our turnout time. So we
Right.
break our times into turnout and drive. And I always say, you can't make it up on the road. You need to get out of the building quick. And this is something that's impeding our ability to get out of that South Fire Station in a timely manner. Not to mention when they fail, then our truck is stuck waiting for the door to go down, or someone has to go in and manually hit the button to try to get the door down. So, it uses sensors, just like your garage door at home. Sometimes those sensors go off, the door won't come down, and they're sitting out there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes trying to get the door down when we're supposed to be there within 5 minutes, 30 seconds for fires. So it's an equipment issue that impedes our operational capability. Plus, they're up for replacement, so it's natural to try to do it now.
I know as a citizen, I wouldn't want to hear you give me the excuse that you couldn't get the truck out the door.
Yeah.
That wouldn't fly very well. So I'm supporting this all the way. I think it's a great deal. And I'm also assuming these are going on the new fire department as we build the new one, correct?
Yes,
These doors will be part of
same
that.
doors are going in at the new fire hall.
Okay.
Mr. Jurdevig.
Would it be possible to take the dollars out of our capital improvement sales tax versus out of our reserve funds? Everybody looks to Jim.
Yeah.
Jim, do you want to comment on that? Do you want me to? Yeah.
Commissioner, what I'd like to tell you is this is something I was just going through our budget. It is rolled into the 2022 budget, but to be funded through a reserve that was created due to funds coming in 2020 in the CARES Act. So this would not come out of our general fund reserve, but there is a reserve out there that this would be used for, that was created through some of the CARES Act funding. And the timing, whether it was in 2021 or 22, it'll all work very well.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Any additional questions for the chief? Or Mr. Larson?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Simmons moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the purchase of the garage doors for the Southside Fire Station to the tune of $209,650 from Midland Garage Doors. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is approve the contract for the construction management advisor for the new fire station. Chief Fuller.
Good afternoon again, Commission President Tardis and members of the commission. This is the next step in the construction of the fire headquarters project. So far, just to recap, we've held interviews and lined up and hired our architect. Currently, we are getting to the point of looking at exterior elevations, what the building's going to look like from the outside, but we have the programming, the floor plan down, total square footage, all of that. The next step is to hire our construction manager advisor group. They're going to come in, they're going to do 3 things for us. Number 1, they're going to go through our design before we even put a shovel in the ground to make sure that any cost efficiencies that can be found in terms of materials or techniques being used to construct the building, and then also, to a lesser extent, how the workforce applies and availability for skilled craftsmen in different areas. They're going to come in and try to make those cuts immediately to show us where we can save some money. Number 2, they're going to work and control all the bid packaging. And this is beyond the prime bids of this, the 3 prime. We go out with a number of bid packages to try to increase the competition and lower the costs for the city. And then number 3, they're going to be on site and actually supervise the entire construction process. So we had come to you last commission meeting with the request to solicit the contract from Kraus Anderson out of Bismarck, North Dakota. We've done that. We have the contract. It's gone through a review from legal. It's gone through review from our architectural firm and also from the finance department. There was some back and forth today in terms of the liability insurance requirements that were on there. I believe you had a red line version that had a correction in your packet, and we just replaced it previous to me getting up here with the original. The original is we've gone ahead and pulled that initial red line change. So the original contract, as it was in your packet last week, still stands. And I'll be available for any, the financial analysis here, there's a pre-construction cost, $12,133, construction cost $412,406, and then 1.75% of the total construction cost. And it spells out in the contract what they estimate those costs to be. It's broken into a 3-part finance. So this would be funded out of Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund. This project was on the long-term capital improvements schedule, and we're looking to break ground in the spring. Probably go to bid with some of the major projects, major parts of the project this fall to get ahead of ordering and production issues of certain large-scale parts of this building. But that's where we sit with the project right now, so I'm asking for approval for the contract for Kraus Anderson Construction out of Bismarck.
To clarify, Chief, you're asking for the pre-construction dollar amount, the construction dollar amount, and the 1.75% of the total construction cost. You're asking for all
Yes,
of
sir.
that? Yes, sir.
Yeah. And we can't give you the number on the bottom until they come in and they cost engineer this thing down.
I will note to the public, though, that when you looked at the proposals, Kraus Anderson's at 1.75 of the total construction cost was the lowest of the multiple bidders that were in there. All of the rest of them were over 2%, 2.25.
I think one might have been 7%. It was a flat 7% fee, but that was still a very high number.
Yes, sir. Any questions, commissioners, of the chief?
No, I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Even though it was a painful contract to read, I will second it.
Emphasis on painful. Commissioner Jurdovic, second. Been moved and seconded to approve contract for the construction management advisor of Kraus Anderson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Item number 7 on our regular agenda is a request to reconsider an improvement district of 1339. Mr. Maherty, GS5 LLC Development Group.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
Eric Murray, representing GS5, and then also representing KPH Inc., the contractor doing the demolition. We're here to have you guys reconsider the improvement district for the Stockyards First Edition. I know this has been a touchy one for you guys, both with phone calls and everything, but since the June 21st meeting, we have in place, our dust control. We've done calcium chloride on the roads out there. We've done calcium chloride on 7th, and we're happy to announce that tomorrow will be the last day of crushing. They'll no longer be taking place on site, so that'll be the end of the crushing, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Jurdebig.
So I believe you were the one that spoke in the June 21st meeting, is that correct?
No, I was not here.
Okay. Somebody from KPH at that meeting made a very specific comment that there was nobody hauling in concrete to be crushed at that site.
Off-site.
From off-site. The very next day, I went out there and saw a truck coming in from off-site. I happened to follow him all the way from Main Avenue and went and dumped on that site, and I've heard from other people, commissioners up here, that have also witnessed that.
Correct.
Was that an attempt to mislead?
No, that was just a miscommunication. So there was 12 loads, we've counted them all, that have been dumped on site. 6 of them, I believe, happened after the 21st meeting, and after that, there was no more on site dumping.
So that person had no idea, even though they presented themselves certainly as somebody that would have known.
I don't believe anyone from KPH was here on the 21st.
I believe it was.
Were you here previously, sir?
Not on the 21st.
On-
Prior to that, yeah.
Okay, well
So
then maybe
it
it
might
was
be-
you that made that comment. So, I mean, it certainly comes across when, whether it was yourself or somebody else makes that comment, and the very next day I see dumping on that site. It certainly comes across that it was a misleading comment to make to this commission. And with all of the debate and the people that were there that evening concerned about the dust and the crushing, I have no other way to take that than it was something less than fully transparent.
Yeah, and it wasn't an attempt to be misleading. It was probably just, we have over 20-some trucks running around with multiple crews, multiple foremen, and I don't know if they all got reached out. I contacted them all, and maybe all of them didn't reach out to the drivers. But after that was announced to us, it was taken care of that day.
But yet other trucks have dumped there since that day.
Since the 21st? All I know is there's been 12 trucks total have dumped there of material.
Any other questions for Eric? Could I call for, Ms. Alshog, would you please join us? Megan Alshog is the Director of Planning and Zoning and has oversight with regard to, is there anything that you'd like to add with regard to this request to reconsider the Improvement District 1339? Obviously, there's been some issues, and I'd like your professional opinion as the lead on this as to your thoughts.
Sure, thanks, Commission President Bernie Dardis and Commission. We have, since early July, June, our code enforcement coordinator has made daily trips out to the site Monday through Friday to check on the operations, check on that measures of mitigation have been happening. On early June, the developer here had made some considerations that they would take care of, including the pumping, the nozzles, watering, the hauling road down. So those were included as part of the demolition permit. We have received a number of calls. Our code enforcement coordinator has, like I mentioned, gone out there. We have not been able to verify that loads have come from off-site. We have not been able to get that on video, but we did just note here that the applicant had noted that. As to commencement of the operations, it was noted last Friday to be end of operations. However, with weather conditions coming from winds from the west, 15 to 30 miles per hour, there was an extension requested in order so that the crushing didn't happen on very poor days, so that it would really impact the neighborhood. And so that extension was granted until end of day tomorrow, and the developer has noted that crushing will commence then. So be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Questions? Megan? Thank you. The last time, sir, please come back. The last time I was on site, there was a load of concrete brought in, and that was concerning, obviously. I notified our code enforcement people as well as Mrs. Elshog immediately. But the thing that troubled me the most was the lack of water. And I had received 2 phone calls that day from one of the residents across the river that said your pump was not running, and it's across the river from his river pump. And, so as Commissioner Jurdevig touched on at the beginning of the discussion is that it's one thing that we continue to have off-site materials brought in, but the other thing is that we were given assurances that we were running plenty of water on there to do everything that we could to mitigate the dust, and that was not happening. Specifically the day I was there at 12:41 in the afternoon. It was a Thursday, and there was absolutely no water going on there. So, and I realize that this is a contractor that's working for G5, and I respect that. So you can't be out there supervising them every minute. But there was no water on there. Because I was at your crushing plant, and I walked to the river. There was not water on that dust. There was no mitigation taking place. And so, with all due respect to, your business and what you folks are trying to do out there, and it's a great thing for the city to clean that mess up out there at the fair, or at the stockyards. Make no mistake. But we cannot have a lack of understanding in dealing with these types of things. We've got a public to protect, and I don't know how many phone calls some of the other commissioners had, but on the dust alone, I wouldn't be exaggerating if I told you I had 15. And that's too many. I mean, when supposedly there was a means of keeping the dust down by, applying water as part of the process. So, understand that the reason that there was not a commission or an improvement district for 1339 is we were very disappointed. I mean, we were being told one thing, but observing personally something else. Commissioners, any more questions of this gentleman?
Just a comment.
Please, Commissioner Olson.
Because we've kind of heard that you plan to do something similar to the crushing plant on this site in the future, once it gets developed, correct?
Something similar, yes.
Yeah. Well, you kind of demonstrated how you would be a good neighbor to that neighborhood up there on how this project has done. So that's why we're kind of giving you the third degree on all this kinds of stuff. Do we really want to have that in the neighborhood when we're told one thing, and like the mayor said, we observe something else? So that's why we're so concerned about this. We need to all be good neighbors out there, and I like to see this project go through, but not the way the cleanup and the demolition of this was done for a future business out there. That's my concern.
Commissioner Simmons.
Okay, thank you. So, I'll be the first one to admit, first one to admit, we had some problems out there, obviously, you know that, Eric as well in the beginning. But I will tell the commission, if anybody has met since then, please speak up now, but, was it 3 weeks, a month ago at our, not the last meeting, prior to one? Mayor Dartis made me the liaison between them. I know there's some other commissioners that wanted to talk to the developer, so I kind of stayed out of that portion. But a week and a half ago, I went out and talked to that neighborhood. Has anybody been out there since then? So I'm not speaking where somebody's been there. So I believe I'd been the last one.
Not been there, but I've had 2 phone calls.
Okay.
A week ago Thursday.
Okay, so I was there a week and a half ago. I talked to those residents, found out exactly what was going on with the dust, with the cement, and I made some calls to you, Eric, as well. And I asked those citizens, I said, okay, here's the deal, do you want to shut them down, or do you want this project completed? I mean, do you want, the bigger scope is to clean that up. That's what this is all about. And they all said the same thing at the time. We don't want to shut down, Mark, we just want to get the dust out of our areas. And so when I called them, just to give these guys a little credit now, they did start the water up. They did put down that chemical, correct, on the roads we talked about. And I haven't gotten a call since, and they all have my number, and they know me very well out there. So I'm not saying they're all happy, but I'm saying that I think you did, when you committed to me a week and a half ago to do what you folks were going to do, I believe you did it. And so that, I think we have to take that into consideration, that they are picking up the pace, and I'm hoping, that we move forward. That will be the process. We won't run into this. We're always going to have some wind out. Look at today. But I mean, I think even by, we're all kind of going, oh, we don't want to, we're hoping they get it done by Friday. But in reality, if you think about it, they took the responsible route. They shut it down when it was too windy. We would have most certainly got calls last week, if that. So they did even though it's going to take another day, you did the responsible thing. So I think we have to, yes, we get to chew you a little bit, right? That's fair. But at the same time, I have to commend you for the good things you're doing. And again, the big picture here, folks, is the end result of what happens, a cleaned up area, and moving forward with the next item. Hopefully, if we have some, other issues on there, but I just think we have to get through this and move on, especially when we're looking at those lagoons. That's on here too. I mean, this is all in the same area of our community, and we have to clean it up. If we don't do something with those roads, it's going to be the same. We're never going to get nothing done. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Jurdevich.
So I will agree with Commissioner Simmons. I'm not necessarily happy with how this has played out over the last few months. That said, I am certainly willing to discuss improvement District 1339 on its own merits and not hold a grudge over it either. So as it relates to reconsidering that improvement district, I think that is the right thing to do.
Thank you. I agree. I would make a motion then to reconsider. Is that what you want, Mayor?
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons moves, Commissioner Olson seconds, to reconsider the improvement district for 1339. This is just a simple yes or no vote, and then we'll have more discussion on the next order of business that's being presented by Mr. Scott. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is item number 8, is the improvement district number 1339, the issue that we've just been discussing, Stockyards First Edition. Mr. Scott is here to ask the commission to create an improvement district, approve the engineer's report, approve a task order number 49, and direct engineering to prepare plans and specifications. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Dartis, members of the commission. So, during the meeting on June 21st, we had brought forward a creation of the district and the engineer's report. Of course, that was tabled as we just discussed. And so tonight really is just to reconsider that. The recommendation at this point now is to create an improvement district and approve the engineer's report, which the next step then, of course, is to prepare final plans and specifications for construction. The reason why we were at this stage, if you recall, back in May, the developer did submit a petition for the improvements, and the commission did accept that petition and direct the preliminary engineering. So based on those proceedings, we basically did that preliminary engineering work, and so again, that's where we are today. Really, the only thing that's changed since June 21st, when this was tabled, there were some minor modifications made to the feasibility study that is included in your packet, but otherwise, still the same improvement project. Sewer, water, streets down a future 7th Street northwest corridor there, and all the other infrastructure that goes along with serving this particular subdivision. So with that, I'll pause and answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Scott? Mr. Jurdevik?
So from my understanding, the first phase of this is to build the roadway component of it with crushed concrete, correct?
That's correct.
Why? Because it seems to me to build the road once with crushed concrete and then come back at some point in the future and pave that road is going to overall make a more expensive project and therefore create more assessment on these lots than otherwise would have to be there.
Great question, Commissioner Jurdevik. So when we did present the petition for the improvements, that was the developer's request was to leave the final paving off for a couple years. And there's two benefits there. One is obviously saving on the cost immediately, but for the city, there's a benefit in that with all of the heavy operations that'll be taking place out there, there's a concern that there would be some settlement underneath this roadway in which things like busted up concrete panels or just settlement of the roads can occur. So if I had my choice on any of our development projects, I would certainly allow, or I'd like to see that utilities go in 1 year and the streets are paved a year or two afterwards. But as you certainly pointed out, that certainly does add cost. But with that added cost comes a more stable end product.
So with that,
Go ahead.
so with that, you know, what is the plan for, I believe it's Lot 4, otherwise known as Mount Manure, I think. I mean, is part of that assessment going to be put on a lot that, I'm not quite sure what the economic value of that lot is, and does it support an assessment?
Well, Commissioner Jurdevik, that leaves my realm, whether or not any one of these lots are being used in the full capacity of what the commission wants to see out there, and or whether or not it can support the assessments that would come. But I can tell you that, yes, the intent here would be to, once we've installed the improvements, we would go about levying the assessments based on our current policy. Lot 4, if I recall, is a relatively large lot, so it'll get a fair brunt of the assessment. And as you can see in the attachments here, the estimated cost for just this improvement district is $2.9 million. In 2 years, when we come to pave the roads, that'll add another, I don't know, I'm not going to throw out numbers, but it'll certainly add to the assessments out there. So whether or not these lots can support that, I don't dive into that as much.
Fair enough.
So-
And that was my concern a few months ago, and it remains my concern now with this assessment district, is just
Yep.
whether or not all of the lots would actually support.
That's a valid concern. That's where, when we do put these together, we try to provide that type of information. What are the assessments going to look like? It's a rough number, but you know, it's easier for me when it's a residential subdivision, and we can see that you know, if we had a development come forward and the proposed assessments were going to be 150 grand on each quarter acres residential property, that's easy for me to say, whoa, that's not panning out. Out here, to put $1 million on one large industrial property, it starts to leave my realm of, is that good or not?
I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
Commissioner Olson?
Just a question on clarification here. Is it 7th Avenue that's on the south end of it? Or what street is that?
Yes, Commissioner Olson, yep, 7th Avenue is to the south.
So is that part of the District 2 that will be improved at a later date, or is it everything north of that?
Oh, thanks, Emily. Currently, 7th Avenue, that is just to the south of the proposed subdivision here, is another, it's a gravel surface roadway. I can't recall if it's a crushed concrete surface or just straight up gravel, but there was discussion of gravel, yep. And so there was discussion when we had a meeting weeks ago that maybe it's time to pave this roadway. It's not included with the proposed improvement district before you. But I would certainly encourage that we move towards getting that roadway paved, which, you know, maybe within the developer's agreement with the plat, there's a condition in there that for the plat to be approved, developer will submit a petition to request 7th Avenue be paved as well. Paving both 7th Street and 7th Avenue certainly will help with dust mitigation, but I do want to point out that I don't know how much of this property will develop with a gravel yard. You know, it's pretty traditional in an industrial setting to have gravel lay-down yards. And so I don't want it to fall on the responsibility of these improvements to contain and control the dust for the surrounding areas, because, you know, a 30 to 40 foot wide paved road is not going to generate as much dust as acres upon acres of gravel lay-down yards. So if that's getting to be somewhat of the concern or the point of your question, Commissioner Olson.
No, that was not the concern. I was just curious if it was in or not.
Yep.
Along that line, though, with the streets that will be developed in there will be city streets, correct?
Correct.
So then we'll be responsible for snow removal, maintenance, all that kinds of stuff out there on the crushed concrete. I'm just making that clear, that we'll be the ones maintaining the roads then.
I
a year
do.
or so, or two.
From my recollection of the early conversations, Commissioner Olson, is that the developer is going to agree to maintain the roadway until it is paved.
Oh, okay.
Again, there is not a final developer's agreement in place, but that would be put into the developer's agreement, that the developer will maintain the roadways out here until the city puts on the paved surface.
And this is all being done in phases, or is it all being, like what you've got there, where the hydrants are and all that are going? Because I see one hydrant that's going in Mount Manure, and I didn't know if that will be able to be put in place all at one time, like the rest of it, or are we staging or phasing this out?
Well, with the timeline where we're at today, I'm not sure how much work could get done this year. And so the work within Improvement District 1339 here would certainly carry over into next year's construction season, but the intent is to get all of the utilities that you see here on this particular page, all of that constructed, and then the roadways up to a crushed concrete surface within this improvement district, and that is what is generating that $2.9 million project estimate. The future phases will include, again, paving the street, which is what you see here on the next map. Now, again, this is just the 7th Street in here, so if 7th Avenue were to move forward, it would be under its own separate district, just like 7th Street here will be its own district in the future, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott, on a previous meeting, did you not indicate that the large transport, the company that's to the south there, had indicated a willingness to consider going to asphalt or concrete road there?
Yes, some years ago, Wayne's Transport, shortly after they had built, they were requesting the city to move forward with a street project paving the road. The city did not move forward in that. Under state statute, the city has to go through a resolution of necessity process. Basically, it's a vote, and more than 50% of that proposed district needs to be in favor of the project. So just in the fact that the stockyards on the north side was roughly 50% of the district, we knew moving forward that was
Wasn't practical at that
wasn't
time,
gonna go
but it
forward.
certainly may be at this point in time with GS5's development. Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Mr. Simmons?
Thank you, Dustin. I am more concerned, again, with the long-term project as well, and my concern is that we all know that if we don't do something on probably 7th Avenue Northwest, those complaints are gonna continue to come in for a year and a half to 2 years until this project's done. If the wind is blowing, that's it, so I'm just wondering if anybody's entertaining the idea of doing that now, of paving it now, or if the crushed concrete would keep it down. I don't know those specifics, but to me, if we paved it, definitely would eliminate that dust from blowing over there. Has anybody entertained that as a staff? Have we discussed that with the developers? Or is the crushed concrete, will that keep it down enough?
Well, the crushed concrete is going to function similar to the a gravel surface.
So no, then it won't, so,
The only way to control that is usually, treating it with calcium chloride, which I believe Public Works did recently. That will help control things. How frequently do we have to apply the calcium chloride out here? I'd have to see. I mean, that's gonna depend on how much use it gets. If we end up with a lot more truck traffic out here once things are under operation, at least with this new development, I'm not sure if one treatment a month or one treatment a week or on a township road, you can make one treatment a season, and that's gonna suffice. Now, is there a willingness to pave it? Again, with both street projects, we legally can't move forward unless we have more than 50% in favor of the district, or at least not with financing with special assessments. So that's where I would suggest that the commission, when we do get to the final plat approvals, puts in a stipulation within the developers' agreements that the developers are in favor, in fact, are going to petition for the street improvement, and maybe that street needs to be paved now. Maybe it needs to be paved when we pave 7th Street Northwest. But those are certainly good things to consider. And at this point, there is no recommendation within the engineer's report. Again, 1339 at this point reflects merely the improvements, the underground improvements and the crushed concrete surface on 7th Street as was petitioned by the landowner.
and Mayor, so that was kind of my question. If we approve this tonight, we still have more authority over moving forward with this project down the road. Sure. In reference to making sure that we can appease everybody, I guess. Not everybody, but the majority of everybody. If that needs to be paved is what I'm saying, we still have some say in that.
Yes, Commissioner Simmons. So the next step in the process will be to prepare plans and specifications. We come back to the commission to approve those. We will not award construction contracts until the plat has final approval. And with the final approval of the plat comes a developer's agreement. And so to me, those details will be worked out, and if not, we won't come forward and award construction contracts. The only challenge is between now and then, how much money do we incur getting to that point? And at this, as you guys are well aware, our consulting fees are generally anywhere from 11 to 15%, depending on the studies that we are doing. So now part of that is for construction administration, so we're gonna incur about 6 to 7% of the construction number that is in this report by the time we get to the awarding a construction contract. That, to me, would be our, call it, risk, which, by the way, if the wheels fell off at that point, those costs would still be subject to being levied through the assessment district process. So this has happened once before where the project doesn't move forward. We take the engineering costs and roll that into the assessment process, and these properties would be special assessed, all of the costs that we do incur.
Mayor, sorry. So if you would allow me, Mayor, so if you would give me I guess in just your personal opinion, what it would take to get to the 50% threshold, what owners of those properties would be able to do that? Is it just the main one, or are there other ones that would have to be involved as well?
Well, I certainly think, you've got Wayne's Transport out here as a significant property. There are, I don't know, at least a half a dozen other owners out here that, by area, if the Stockyards and Wayne's Transport, if they're in favor, by area, that would satisfy our, call it, statute requirements. But would the commission still move forward if you have 6 other owners out here saying, we're not ready to have this bay, we can't afford it, we don't want this? That would be a decision that you'll have to make at that time. And we've seen that before too, where even though the majority area is not protesting, it just took a handful of people to come in and protest. If I recall, Commissioner Simmons, back in 2008, paving the alleys was a similar situation. Mm-hmm. All it took was really a few property owners to come and protest that, and we did not move forward. So So yes, from an area standpoint, 50%, I think we would have it if the GS5 Development Group and Wayne's Transport are petitioning for the improvements. We can certainly move forward in terms of the legal basis, but the commission would still have the ability to take a vote on moving forward at that time. And so if we have 6 other property owners in this area against it, would the commission move forward?
Okay.
Mr. Scott, could you pull up page 256, please? One of the points that Commissioner Jurdevig made is that, you know, this improvement district is a closed district in the sense that it's all GS5, right?
Correct.
Correct. So that, with regard to Mr. Jurdevig's question about a specific lot, the burden of the infrastructure and the like, GS5 has demonstrated time and again that they're totally capable of great developments in our community. So I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is that during one of the previous meetings in the last several months, there was a comment made that the excavation company at the end of the drive, right next to the river, had bought a portion of this. Is that correct?
I'm
Is
not sure.
Is that 5 acres? Is that right, Mr. Graham? Yep. So that 5 acres is in that southeast corner where all that granite is piled and the like. Does that complicate what we're suggesting, Commissioner Simmons, about the landowners and the people that face 7th Avenue, because that ownership group in the past has been absolutely against, as I recall the history and monitoring city commission meetings, that they've always been against that. So that might complicate, there's a possibility of that. We might need the GS5 principles to maybe help move that forward a little bit with that ownership group. But that, I think, would complicate it because of the amount of footage that they have along 7th Avenue. Commissioner Jurdevig.
I'm going to just restate what my concern is here, and that is, you know, the lot that largely contains a mountain of manure will probably be handed a $400,000 to $500,000 assessment. And I am fans of the developer, but common sense tells me the easiest way to get rid of that manure then would be to let the city or county take ownership of that lot and not to have to deal with that. So I'm concerned with putting that large of a dollar amount of an assessment on a lot that I'm not sure what the value of it is.
Commissioner Jurdevig and Commission. I just want to express, when special assessments are spread, they're spread based on the benefit, and Dustin knows this, he can say it in his sleep. And I do not know that there would be much benefit to the lot that has the pile of manure. It would probably, I can't speak for the Special Assessment Committee or for the Engineering Department, but it is based on benefit, and there's really...
But quality of lot has never been factored into benefit. If the roadway goes by 2 lots and one has lower value, are you saying that they by default get lower benefit? Because we have houses that are right next to each other that one might be worth twice the other one. They don't get handed different assessments unless their lot size is different. So I'm struggling with that answer.
There is also, we negotiate sometimes when we have one property owner that owns the majority of the area, we work with them on the assessments and how they're allocated as well. But Dustin can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, like you said, Commissioner Jurdevig, we generally will not look at the current use because uses can change. There's redevelopment. I think that's where you're going with this, is that the redevelopment potential here seems low, but like I said earlier, I generally won't get overly engaged with, you know, development opportunities and likelihoods and whether or not, now I'd certainly want to raise the flag if this $2.9 million assessed over this area is extremely high, but if I recall, on a per square foot basis, it's not much different than what we have along Christensen's Drive where Harley Davidson and all finished concrete are. So, but again, yes, that is a risk that is out there, that this property could go back to the county on taxes and those assessments now not paid. We do have a requirement to execute a promissory note in the amount of 50% of the estimated cost of the improvements. We haven't moved forward in drafting that yet, but you know, if we're proposing a $2.9 million district, 50% of that needs to be submitted in via a promissory note by the developer. In the event something like that happens, we can now go after that promissory note, and that'd be something I'd defer to John to talk further about. But and I think where Administrator Fisk was going is that when it's been a one property owner development, a unique commercial area like this, I mean, this is more unique in that it's the industrial nature, but we have worked with that particular developer to, I guess, allocate assessments based on the way they petitioned, and in some cases, you know, a particular parcel, because of maybe a geographical disadvantage, had a reduction in the amount of allocation, but that was the property owner accepting more of the assessment on a different parcel, you know, so there have been those cases, and that's something that is certainly a potential
That would
here.
certainly address my concern if that was part of.
Yep.
Additional questions for Mr. Scott? Again, the item of discussion is for an improvement district 1339 to create an improvement district, approve an engineer's report, approve the task order number 49, and direct the engineer to prepare plans and specifications.
Mayor, again, I just think to move forward with anything out there, we have to approve this part of the project and move forward. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? So I'd make the motion that we approve the District 1339.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve and create an improvement district 1339, approve the engineer's report, approve the task order number 49, and to direct the engineer to prepare plans and specifications. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is the hours of operation of liquor sales, ordinance 1192, first reading. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the West Fargo City Commission. Tonight, you have before you the first reading of ordinance number 1192 regarding changing the hours of service on Sundays, starting at 8 a.m. rather than noon. Previously, the state law restricted the hours that establishments could be open on a Sunday morning. And in the recent legislative session, the legislature changed section 50205 of the Century Code, allowing cities to allow their licensees to open earlier at 8 a.m. You're, of course, not required to, as a commission, to allow that to open as early, but we have had requests from establishments to change the ordinance. The proposed changes before you are intended to match our section of the ordinances to state law, almost word for word.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any questions for Mr. Shockley? Again, this is an update of our ordinances to be in compliance with new state law that took effect, what, John, July 1st, or is it going to be August 1st?
It just became effective August 1st. It didn't
August
have an
1st, thank you, sir. If I could, I'd like to call on Chief Otterness. Any thoughts, concerns about this, that we be in, obviously not in compliance with state law, but for our citizens?
No, I think it probably makes the most sense to have our city ordinances, match the state statutes that we're
Right.
required to enforce, so.
All right, thank you, Chief. Questions of Mr. Shockley? Anyone?
Make the motion to approve.
the changes.
Commissioner Olson moves, Commissioner Simmons seconds to approve the hours of operation of liquor sales, ordinance 1192, first reading. So we are only approving the first reading of this. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 10, drought and water system response measures. Ordinance 1191, first reading. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney in City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the West Fargo Commission. Before you, you have new ordinance 1191. This ordinance is an outgrowth of the water service agreement that the City of West Fargo previously signed with Fargo. Pursuant to that agreement, the City of West Fargo is required to adopt a drought ordinance so that when there is drought conditions, that water restrictions go in place so as to preserve the amount of water that's being distributed from the Fargo plant. I have a couple questions. I'll briefly go over the ordinance since it's brand new. I have one question at the end. This ordinance is modeled closely after the City of Fargo ordinance, which is, for anybody who's interested, Article 1609 of the Fargo City Code. So the first section really talks about the procedural definitions, and really I think where you get into the important part of the ordinance is 9503. This allows the designee of the city to draft regulations prescribing the limitations and use of water. And so recognizing that there's multiple types of water uses throughout the community, some people could have private wells, some people could be drawing from the river, some people could have alternative sources of water like rain barrels, things like that. The intent is that whoever you designate would draft regulations. Those regulations can't go into effect until they're approved by the city commission. So it's not like you're just giving somebody authority to go regulate whatever they want to regulate. They still have to draft regulations and come back to the city commission. The timeline is that if the city commission approves this ordinance, then we would go back, draft those regulations, and come back for approval from the city commission later in this year. The next part of the ordinance, 504, I think is also important. This whole ordinance does not come into effect until there's a declared drought emergency by the city commission. So once again, there's a checks and balances that city staff just cannot declare a drought emergency. That has to come from the city commission. It goes through the 4 phases, which are very similar to the City of Fargo's. I think it's important to have consistency between City of Fargo and West Fargo because we're using water from the same source. 9505 is what I call the safe harbor provision. Even though you might draft a regulation, there's always that exception to the rule. And so it gives whoever you ultimately designate to enforce the ordinance the ability to grant waivers. Sometimes, there's exceptions to every rule, and it just gives that ability. I think one of the questions they will have for the commission is, in this draft, we've included the city administrator or his or her designee as the person to enforce the ordinance. I put that in for purposes of drafting, but there's a couple people that I think could be in that position. The first is, of course, the city administrator. The second, you could have the president of the city commission. The third, you could have the commissioner who's in charge of water, street, and sewer. And the fourth, I suppose you could have like the public works director or somebody else that would be in charge of it. I would note that if you're going to have either the president of the city commission or a commissioner that's in charge of it, when there's appeals of rulings under the ordinance, that commissioner probably couldn't make a decision to hear that appeal because that commissioner would be the one that would be ordering the action. So just something to consider. That's why I put the city administrator in there, thinking that the commission might want to actually hear appeals rather than take care of the enforcement. But that's a city commission decision. The next one is enforcement procedures. Pretty straightforward. The idea is that if there's emergencies, you can take action. But then there's also administrative orders that are defined in the beginning of the ordinance. The person that's committing the violation has 10 days to correct. If they don't, then it's a hearing in front of the city commission. And then there's also, the next section is talking about the remedies, which it includes water shut off. I think the second is really important. So if you have a developer or contractor who's willingly breaking the orders for drought, you can withhold their permit authorization for projects. I think that's a really good tool for enforcement. There's injunction relief, which that you'd have to actually go to court. I don't know that there'd ever be a situation in which we'd have to go to court, but it's nice to have that in the ordinance. It does allow us to collect our costs and fees. The kind of the final section, there's a number of boilerplate sections, but 512 regarding the power and authority of inspections. We have very similar provisions in all of our water ordinance. What that means is that you're authorizing staff to go out and inspect water systems. Now, if the homeowner denies entry, it doesn't give them the right to barge in and break down the door. Only a court order can do that. What this does is it pre-authorizes staff to go out and conduct the inspections. It doesn't authorize forcible entry. That takes a warrant that's signed by a judge. If the applicant were to, or the violator were to refuse entry, then we could go back to the city commission, or potentially you could go to a court to have an administrative search warrant issued. The reason that we do that is oftentimes there might be pipes that are misattached, or sometimes there's vacant houses that, you know, the water is broken in there and it's flooding the basement or something else. And so that's why we include it in the ordinance. I can certainly answer any questions you have. I want to emphasize that this ordinance does not come into effect until the city commission actually declares a drought emergency. So hopefully in years in the future, it won't ever become activated, but it is a requirement of our agreement with Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley? Commissioner Olson?
Just a clarification, this does not affect people from pulling water out of the river or their own personal well if they should happen to have a private well on their property?
Currently, we haven't even gotten to the point of drafting regulations, so the short answer is no. We would want to cover those sorts of issues in the regulations that would come back before the city commission. I think I'd want to hear, have the city engineer's input. There may be in extreme droughts, you might be lowering the water table. I know we don't have any golf courses, but if you had a really big water user that was pulling from the aquifer and had a 1930 style drought, you may want to have the ability to regulate, it'd be kind of tough for one citizen to see a massive industrial user watering their lawn, draining the aquifer while they're on serious drought restrictions. And so those are the kind of things that you'd want to work through in the regulations that we would draft and then bring back to the city commission for consideration.
Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, John. I would think that there would be state laws already referring to river, taking river out of the water in their own well. You're referring to an aquifer, city aquifer, but we're not using, actually, we probably would go back to those during the drought. I know we would. So, but I think the concern is more river water and then people that may have their own well, on their properties or what have you. It's pretty hard to dictate to them that they can't take water out of there because they own portions of them. I don't think that's something we want to get into as a city. I think the state would probably get there long before we did, and we'd have to follow suit with something anyway.
And it's certainly something we can take on in the regulations that we draft. One thing I would note is that Fargo and all of the parties that draw water from Fargo, water's drawn out of the river. And in Western water law, there is what's referred to as appropriations. So you as a landowner along the river, you don't necessarily have, there's Eastern water law and Western water law. And Western water law is appropriations, so you could be fined by the state for pulling water out of the river if you don't have the appropriations permit. And West Fargo has, I think, the largest appropriations permit in Lake Ashtabula of all of the users. So like Grand Forks has appropriations, right? Fargo does, and West Fargo. I think there's a couple other small towns that have rights behind the dam. So it's a kind of a complex area, and that's why we'd probably want to look at a regulation, how you address that, because my concern is that I hope we never get in a situation, but if you're truly in a 1930s style drought, those sorts of issues could become really critical for the city.
I know that prior to for history purposes, again, I know that prior to this commission, quite a few years back, we were getting into somewhat those talks, and Fargo appeared to think that they own most of our water in the Cheyenne as well. So there were some, for history here, there were some issues about that. I don't think that's a road we probably want to go down with this at all right now, and just keep it to the city portion of it.
All right, so again, this is a first reading, and excuse the expression, Mr. Shockley, maybe a work in process for some of the fine tuning, so.
I'll make a motion to approve first reading.
Thank you.
Second.
Commissioner Simmons moved, Commissioner Jurdevig second. Mr. Shockley.
One question I would ask the commission to consider over the next 2 weeks is, who do you want to put in charge of administering the ordinance? Right now in the draft, we have the city administrator. That can be changed at second reading, and so we don't need a decision tonight, but just something to think about as you're contemplating it over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley.
One comment before we do it, thank you. As I read through this, I don't think it really matters there's the city administrator, because it has to be approved by us anyway first. So that really is, it's more of a staffing, or, type of, the way I read it, if I read it right? So are you agreeing with that?
Right, I mean,
Okay, then I don't think it matters in my opinion, so I'm fine with it.
ultimately, it comes back to the city commission one way or another, so.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? This is on the drought and water system response measures, 1191, first reading. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 11 is a resolution setting sewer service surcharge rate for non-residential users. Mr. Shockley.
I'm actually going to yield my time to Matt. I just prepared the first page of the resolution.
Okay.
I'm going to let Matt talk about biosolids and.
Mr. Matt Anvick, Director of Public Works for the City of West Fargo.
Let's see if I'm on the right. I'll get to the right page here, and then we'll go from there. Good evening, Commission President, Commissioners. The resolution tonight, the pre-treatment surcharge that Mr. Shockley has drafted for us. I guess this surcharge is kind of needed just to recoup any costs that we might incur, if a customer has an illicit wastewater discharge. That would affect the levels of pollutants that we send to the city of Fargo now that we're sending our wastewater there. In most cases, it's more cost-effective for a business to just pay a slight surcharge for any overage on a discharge than actually spending the money to have a treatment system themselves. It also just kind of helps encourage the industry users that we have currently to, police themselves and avoid illicit discharges, so it keeps their surcharge down. As it's shown here, that surcharge is kind of developed through a formula. It's kind of a complex one to do that, but it basically is monitoring maybe three things. It's the BOD, it's the biochemical oxygen demand, the total suspended solids of the TSS, and then other pollutants such as metals, oils, and greases. This is just really in case they have a extra discharge with extra oil or grease or metals or different kind of industrial products that might have a blockage in one of our lines or manholes. It would just kind of recoup some of our costs for that. We're also suggesting a $70 per 1,000-pound fee for the commission to set as well. Fargo's at $45. I think Bismarck is like $350. They're a lot higher. We're just kind of looking at making sure that we cover all our costs if we do have to do a surcharge. And right now, I think we have about 8 industrial users in town that this would affect currently.
How many?
8.
8? Thank you.
And that, I guess, if there's any questions for Mr. Shockley or myself.
Thank you, Mr. Anvick. Questions? Commissioners?
I didn't hear what our fee was gonna be.
What's that?
Surcharge fee, what was ours gonna be?
I suggested for $70.
And you said Fargo's 45?
Yeah.
Why are
And
we so
Bi-
much more?
Bismarck is 300.
Why are we so much more than Fargo, though?
Just to make sure that we, at one part of we're suggesting some more of just a fee for, we have somebody go out there and doing that as well, plus what we would pay, because we would pay that $45 plus to Fargo. Because we would actually have, if it costs us, if, say, a customer of ours had a discharge that raised our levels, we would pay the surcharge to Fargo. So we'd have to do that plus cover our cost of,
So we have the cost of going out there and
our
I
cost of
realize
going
that,
out there.
but that's like double, I mean, almost double what Fargo is. That seems excessive, and
So, right now, that was our suggestion. So, I mean, it's up to the commission, as you guys said, to set that.
Commissioner Jerdovich.
So how often will we be doing sampling and testing? What's the
We do it quarterly right now.
quarterly?
Additional questions?
Well, I just have the resolution doesn't list any prices, so where does the $70 come into play? I mean, that's a suggestion, so it doesn't.
That was
have
just
to be-
our pre-treatment specialist when she was kind of going through what other towns are doing, and then just a service fee on top of the $45 that would be.
I understand that, but where does it actually put it in writing that we're gonna charge $70? It doesn't say in the
Is that something we
resolution
can
what it
add?
would be charged.
What's that? Exhibit A, I believe.
Mr. Commission President and members, the resolution is actually really simple. The actual charges are contained within the Exhibit A, which is a surcharge program. And so I defer to Matt on how they want to set up the charges.
but I don't,
Yeah, I think it's listed here under Article B and then Section 2. I think on here it was $45 suggested, or in here for the BOD, and $50 for the TSS.
yeah, where do you get the 70? There's nothing on here, is there? It's a 70? Am I missing it? I see 45.
Right.
And I see 50 for TS. I see nowhere where our fee is $70.
That was originally when originally talked to Mr. Shockley about that, but then when we came, we started doing a little bit more math on it with the service fee on top of what we would be paying Fargo. Once again, that's a suggestion. I mean,
No,
we can go by with the 45 and the 50 if you want to do that, that's fine.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yes.
Matt, no disrespect to you or the staff in this case, but this is not how it should be done. You should come in front of us with an exact written sum of what you want. This is kind of like me sitting up here saying, wow, let's just charge $80. We need a rhyme and reason to why we're doing it. And on here you show I'm not, again, no disrespect to you, but it's like we need a little bit more detailed information when we're going to tell our citizens we're going to raise our commercial properties, their wastewater rates. I just don't think this is the way it should be done.
And this would only be, they'd only be charged this if they actually went above their limits. This is not an every month charge, it's only if they go above their limits.
But you want us to set the rates tonight, right? That's what this is about, isn't it? Setting the sewer surcharge rate?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we would like to set, but I mean, that's like, the $45 would be exactly what we would pay to Fargo if there was a charge. And that's why if we went above it with the service charge for the $70, but we wanted to bring, I guess, both of them to you as options for, if you want to go by what is written here, the 45 and 50, that works for us. If you want to put the $70 in there with the service charge, that's fine too, but we want to leave it up to the commission to make that decision.
Commissioner Jerdovich.
We're testing for this currently.
Correct.
So how often is there Do these,
Spike
testing-
above?
Yeah, how often do they spike above? Frequently or pretty infrequent?
Very, I think, I don't know exact numbers, but I know, I think this last month, if we had this in place, I may be off, but I think it was like one place would have been charged like $5. If we went by, I think the $70, I think it'd be like a $5 or $10 fee. Very, I mean, it all depends on what they're doing at the time. And, you know, I know one time we had one that spiked up a little bit, and they had an oil separator that filled up more than, I would say, 90% of the time or more, they would not have this charge.
Any other comments?
So just to be clear, the surcharge is only when it actually is caught and happens. It isn't added on to their monthly
Correct.
sewer bill. And the dollar amount is based on the amount of discharge, so it could be minuscule or it could
Yep.
be huge, depending upon how much went through.
Yeah, if something happens and they have a large discharge, then, you know, they would be paying for that. But if it's, you know, something minor, it could be, you know, a few dollars.
So under item B, number 2, subsection C, you have the $45 in front, and I don't know if that's what's confusing people or not. So you have 45, 50, and 45. Is that right?
Correct.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Well, I think it's okay to charge a surcharge when we're covering our costs of doing the testing. So I guess I would make a motion to approve along with Matt's recommendation of the $70, right?
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdebig. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the resolution setting sewer service surcharge rates for non-residential users as depicted in this document. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carried. Item number 12 is the purchase of a second dozer and seeder for the lagoon decommissioning. Mr. Matt Anvik, Director of Public Works, City of West Fargo.
Good afternoon again, Commission President and Commissioners. Before we get into that, I'm just going to give you a little update on where we're at with lagoons currently. Just kind of an update. We began work, you know, really, I guess the dirt work part of it in June 2021. We currently have 4 employees working with the lagoon decommissioning. We still have one more position to fill. We originally were 1 crew chief and 4 employees, or you know, operators underneath them. Currently we have 3 that are filled. We're still looking to fill that 4th position. Right now, we're sending about 2 million gallons a day of wastewater to Fargo. Currently, as you see on the map, cells 1, 2, and 7 are the only ones that are in use. 8, 9, 10 are completely dry currently. 3, 4, 5, and 6 are basically just shut off, and we're using them as kind of backups if in case we need to. Our goal currently will be to have cells 9 and 10 completely graded and planted by November. This is cell 10, as you can see on the left-hand side there. That was on June 9th. We had just got all the water kind of drained out of it. The top right corner there is our dozer just heading into the lagoons for the first time. And then the bottom one there is on June 18th when we just started to do some grading. That's a view to the east of cell 10. This is just when we started moving. You can see 2 of the excavators there to your left with your dozer to the right on cell 10. This is what it looked on July 26th, actually, where it was graded and actually dug. We still have a little bit of fine grading left to do that. Cell 9 on the 9th, it was still had still water in it. By July 26th there, it was, we were just draining it as well. That was today. It's completely dry. Cell 8 is the same way. June 9th, it was still had water in it. We were draining it down. By the 26th of July, it was completely dry. And now this is a current photo of cell 10 and 9 as of today with the grading on there. So get back out of that. And then so now it'll be, I guess, back to my original thing for tonight. It was purchasing a second dozer and a seeder for the lagoons. Both of these pieces of equipment kind of fit in with the same scope of the project, and project and budget of the original, I guess, what I proposed back last fall that you approved. The purchase of the second dozer and the seeder actually will ensure that we stay on budget on time. It's one of those things that it looks good on paper until you actually start getting in the dirt, and then when we get in the dirt, things change a little bit. And one of the things that when the crews started getting in there, they noticed right away where if we had a second dozer, everything would go a lot more smoothly and faster. Just the example, we go through and do a rough grading with the dozer we have, and once we get the entire cell done, which like cell 10 is about 60 acres, we have to go back, do it again, and each time that's about 2 weeks. Had we had a second dozer to do that, we can do the rough grading with the second dozer and then come back with the other dozer for final grading. That would actually, add or shave time off of that by, probably a good 4 weeks on cell 10 or cell 9 once we start going on that. It's just one of those things where we looked at, say, renting, leasing, or purchasing a second dozer, and purchasing a dozer for like $140,000, I think is what we're looking for, is the cheapest route to go. I think we looked at renting. If we went to rent a dozer for the next 5 years at 6 months per year, it was like $350,000 in rental charges. This way, I think on the next slide here, when we had this, we were looking at, just say the Komatsu there, the second one from the bottom. The total, if we purchased it for $135,000, the total cost over the lifespan is only, total cost of ownership is only about $98,000 for that. I think I did say in my memo that we probably should be able to cut, at least a year after the decommissioning. And it's a likely because we're weather dependent. Right now, I could say we're probably a year ahead of what we thought we were going to be on paper. Next year, if we get a bunch of rain, we could be 6 months behind. We just don't know. It's kind of weather dependent. The drought's bad for everybody else, but for decommissioning a lagoon, it's pretty good. So that kind of takes care of that dozer. The seeder itself, once we get everything dug and the bed prepped, then we have to go in and seed it. The prices we were getting were about $21,000 to seed cell 10 one time. The seeder we're looking at is about $12,000. And the total cost, it's about $350 an acre to seed. For the 400 acres we'd have, it's $140,000 one time to seed the entire lagoon area. More than likely, we'll have to go back and spot seed, reseed different areas by spending that $10,000 or $12,000 for a seeder. We'll have that ability and the flexibility to go back and reseed those areas, or there might be other times where we have to move sludge from another cell into, say, 9 and 10 and spread it over those areas and reseed it again. And every time we do that, if we had contractors come in and do it, then we would, we'd be paying them, probably $20,000 extra to do it when we can do it for probably 5 or 10. So those are kind of why I came in front of you today to ask, I guess, for your permission to go ahead and make a purchase for a second dozer and a seeder for the lagoon project.
What is the width of the seeder? How big a unit is it?
We're looking at a 12-footer right now.
12-footer, so you're not pulling that with a dozer though, are you?
No, there's one of the tractors that we do have to use.
Commissioner Olson?
Matt, could you put up the pictures of the lagoons right now where you've got the bulldozer in there? I just need to use it for a point of reference.
Okay. 1 second. That's probably this one.
So
Well, it's up there. Is the dozer moved all of that dirt, the entire amount, pushed dirt across the entire lagoon?
Yes.
Okay.
What they did is they came through right through the center here, and we made a center swale, and then basically almost put some Ys in there as, a different, almost a drain coming in from the different ways, and then we graded it to that center. So with the dozer we have in the GPS unit we have on there, we were able to put our grade on there and get the grade going from, I guess, the north side to the center and the south side to the middle to get everything to drain towards that middle section there.
I just want to get an understanding of how much work the dozer does. Does it just make one path through there, or it works the entire cell?
It works the entire, this is a better picture here of when they are starting. They had to go through and push. This is probably about, that's 3 solid days of working right there, and this is as far as they got. And, they're probably only pushing 20 feet all the way down, and that's 3 days of work right there. And by adding that second dozer, we'd have one dozer could do this center stuff, but then at the same time, we could have another dozer working on this entire area, just rough grading it as well.
How do you staff that second dozer?
That would be that extra person the one that we're waiting to hire would cover that right now and currently. Or we have one of the people that would be doing it right now, we'd probably take him out of one of the other pieces of equipment just to put in that dozer.
But in your 2021 budget, you had a full-time equivalent? Is that correct?
No, this one was approved this past year.
2020.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Jurdovic.
So I have a number of questions. So, first off, kudos for being where we're at. I guess when we talked about this earlier this year, I would never have guessed that by November we'd have 20% of our lagoons basically completely done in terms of or at least seeded and so forth, and with a third one close behind. That's obviously a benefit of a really dry year.
Yeah.
And so I look at this from kind of two perspectives, and if next summer is equally as dry, I look at the 4 people that are there today with the equipment that we have, we're going to be down to 3 lagoons, maybe 4, without spending any more money, because we'll do exactly what we did. And if it's really wet, I kind of feel like these dozers are going to be sitting there anyways, not doing anything. So from my perspective, I'm totally on board with the cedar. I think that makes great financial sense based off what you've presented. But the additional dozer, I'm not sure. It feels, we're way ahead schedule. To be quite honest with you, I'm sitting here wondering, well, do we need that 5th person? The way, you've been so successful,
right,
that it makes me question that. So I guess that's I would like when we vote on this to, if we could, break these apart into 2 separate things as well.
You do that. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. On that same topic, man, I'm just curious, we don't have cedar at all now, is that correct?
We currently do not.
We do not. So the cedar really has nothing to do with the dozer. You just put them both together, but they're two
Right,
separate,
as one
right?
together, yeah.
From the dollar standpoint.
From the dollar standpoint.
dollar
They're
standpoint,
separate,
correct.
they are kind of separate issues, so
Yeah.
I agree with Commissioner Jurgovec on that one.
So I have a question. In their process of decommissioning these, and your request for additional equipment, Matt. I think I know the answer, but is there a process of using these bulldozers during the wintertime and before it gets really frozen? You're gonna continue to process through December or whatever the weather will allow you to, or?
Yeah, we will use this, as long as we can. Like last year, we could have been going until it really froze hard. We can use it as much as possible. The one that we are currently looking at is like a D6 size where we'd be able to move that and use that. If we do get a bunch of, snow in the winter, we could push up our snow piles with that in the winter. Or the D8 that we have right now is a little bit too heavy for that. We don't want to really tear up things. This size would. The one thing with purchasing this compared to renting is, if we only use it for a couple of years or, say 3 years and we do, if it's another dry year and we get way ahead of schedule, it is possible to sell one of them down the road and recoup some of that cost, and we'd still be money had we rented it instead. But yeah, I mean, to Commissioner Jurdovic's point, if we continue this route, yeah, we are definitely going to try and go after 3-4 more next year and try and do that. With that second dozer, we definitely would be, but it is weather dependent. If we do get a wet year, we might not be doing as much, but if we get a dry year, we could do a lot. So it's kind of one of those things where if you so choose and you guys want to just stay with where we're going right now, we can do that and our guys will roll with it. I just wanted to bring this forward saying, hey, we can do a lot more with a second one. I guess this isn't us just looking for another toy. We're looking, we want to get the best bang for our buck and stay within our budget to try and get this done as fast as we can, is what I'm trying to do.
We certainly appreciate that. Mr. Olson, did you have something additional?
I was just curious about, you got cells 8, 9, and 10 pretty much done, right?
We're working on them. They're completely dry and shut down.
Dry.
We still need to get into 9 and 8 and do some grading to those yet this year is what we're trying.
You haven't done the grading on that one. I was just curious because on the photos it looked like they were done. But
Yeah, we ran into. 8 has more biosolids or sludge in there, but it's just another one of those things where we ran into that. Our original sludge judges were like somewhere in an 8-9 inch range. Well, when it dries and shrinks down, now we're probably down in the 6 to 5 range on average. So on paper, we're going for this level, but when in reality, we're at a different level. The same way as 9 and 10. 10 hardly had anything in there. We could turn it, and they were getting in there and digging it like a normal field. 9 will be the same way. When it was a loose sludge, it was probably 6 inches. Now it's probably down to 3 or 4.
will you have to go over that again with the dozers? Or will you just go in there with a disc or a cultivator and work it that way?
Yeah, well, the intention right now, we'll see how dry it is, but we have about another 2-3 weeks work on cell 10 to be completely done with that one. Cell 9, we're gonna try and get in there and actually dig that, if we can get the tractor in without getting it stuck. Just dig that to make it dry down even more. And then as soon as 10's done, we'll move right into 9 and try and get everything graded.
Anything else for Matt? Commissioner Simmons.
Again, Mayor, other than just, I think we'd like to separate these two up still,
Okay.
regardless.
All right, let's address the cedar first.
I'd make a motion to approve the cedar.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovich. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve Public Works to purchase the cedar for the decommissioning of our lagoons. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
And the second one would be?
The second is if you're in favor of it, make a motion to purchase. If you're not, we leave it lie, and there's no, you can do it either way, to deny or the lack of a motion, either way.
Well, I can handle that. I'll make a motion, unfortunately, to deny the dozer.
Commissioner Simmons moves to deny the second, purchase of the second dozer. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to deny the second dozer purchase at this time from Public Works. Is there any further discussion?
Other than one, Matt, I'm not saying that, my words just came out maybe wrong. I'm just saying that we need to be clear with you what we want to do. I don't want to just let it die for lack of emotions.
Yep, oh, that's fine. We'll just continue as is.
Any further discussion? Again, the motion is to deny. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries on a 3-to-1 vote.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Advick. Number 13, City Administrator's Report.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I don't have a lot for you for today. I did want to give you a little update from the last Economic Development Committee meeting. At the last Economic Development Committee meeting is where they considered the pilot that you just heard today. And the committee had some confusion, as they've always had when they do a pilot, because pilots of this type particularly, they're housing pilots. So it's just kind of difficult area for them to tread on. So what they've done is they've directed Ms. Orchard to work on policies for pilots and procedure, and then bring that back to them for review, and then push that forward to the commission to see if you would want to set that as a policy so that there's something concrete. So I know Ms. Orchard is working on that, and I just wanted to give you an update that will be coming your way. The only other thing I have is Robbie Grandy from the West Fargo Airport wanted to come and address you and give you some information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Commission President, Commissioners. On behalf of the West Fargo Airport, I just wanted to take a minute and acknowledge, excuse me, can't talk, Chief Fuller and Chief Otterness and their response to the airplane accident on Tuesday. A scene that is not very common, and thankfully, but they handled the response very well. They had their people in place, and it's good to know that they're ready for the unfortunate airplane accidents also. So thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you for joining us. Correspondence?
I have handed out packets to each of you of the correspondence that has been received.
Commissioners, do you have any non-agenda items? Commissioner Olson.
Thank you. I've been thinking about how we ended the last meeting about tasking our staff with finding ways to cut our preliminary budget by another mill. And by cutting the budget by another mill, it basically reduces the proposed tax of only $4.50 per $100,000 home or value. And most of that cuts would come from possibly staggering employees being hired or cutting out training. And I feel it's a waste of our staff's time to search for that money in savings, especially in the training, because we need to have our staff trained for any situation that may arise. It may look good politically, but it may hurt us down the road politically too, because if we have to cut services or we didn't send that right person to that training, that maybe it affects the life or the services of somebody that we have in our city. So I think we should just leave it the way it is and not task them to continue to search, to nickel and dime their departments to cut a training session here or maybe one piece of apparatus over here, because it isn't I don't want to sound insincere towards the taxpayers, but to try to reduce our services by that much is not the right way. We're just going to keep kicking that that expense down the road to the next year, because it's going to hurt us again and again and again. So I think it's just time to bite the bullet, and we leave the mills at 4.5. Thank you.
Any other commissioner have any non-agenda items? With regard to the reviews of the budget, the administrative and finance, which Commissioner Jurdevig and I serve on, the dialogue that we have had with administration and finance has never been focused on reducing services. It has been on reducing some of the cost, or some of those expenditures can sometimes be broken down to wants and needs. So they've been challenged to review it again, and that's all that they've been. At no point was there any discussion that we're going to reduce services by pulling some firemen off the EMS people off the street, or heaven forbid, police department people. So it's part of the process in review. I realize that Mrs. Fisk and Mr. Solberg and Mr. Larson have went through this very thoroughly. We as commissioners need to understand that prior to us getting a preliminary budget, or a preliminary to budget, there was a lot of work done, and there was a lot of discussions that take place. And we respect that process, and we appreciate that process. But nonetheless, we also have taxpayers that are always calling us and commenting to us about the mill increases that we have to sometimes endure. So it's part of the process, and we respectfully asked Mrs. Fisk, Mr. Larson, and Mr. Solberg to take one more review on that. That's all that that direction was from Commissioner Jurdevig and myself. We want one more review done on it. It's going to be a tough year. There's lots of talk about other jurisdictions, whether it's the Park District or the County Commission, or, excuse me, not the County Commission, the West Fargo Public Schools, that there are going to be some mills levied because of need and services. And so we just want to be as responsible as we can as a city too. So, again, any other non-agenda items? Staff, do you have any non-agenda items you'd like to bring forward? Anybody? Okay, Commissioner Simmons.
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson.
Second.
We stand adjourned.